What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about building a lasting faith legacy after 50 is backwards? That the empty nest, the quiet house, the feeling that your most important years are behind you, what if all of that is actually the setup for your most spiritually powerful season? I'm about to share 22 life-changing insights that will transform how you see your faith journey after 50. We're talking about building a legacy that doesn't just survive you, it multiplies through generations. Here's what we'll cover: why your scars make you more qualified than your successes, the 5-minute morning practice that changes everything, and the shocking truth about why God saved some of His best work in you for right now. If you're between 50 and 70, this could be the turning point between a faith that fades and a legacy that lasts centuries. Here's what recent research reveals. Women over 50 report the highest levels of spiritual satisfaction and purpose. Despite society's narrative about decline, a Harvard study of adult development found that meaning-making peaks in our 6th decade, not our 3rd. They're women over 50 who've walked through fire and decided their scars tell a story worth sharing. Whether you're married or single, mother or childless, career woman or homemaker, when you hit 50, something universal shifts. The house gets quieter. The mirror shows lines that weren't there yesterday. And suddenly you start asking the question that both terrifies and liberates. Did my life matter? Feel that hollow ache when the house is too quiet? That's not emptiness. That's space God is preparing for something bigger. There's a unique beauty in spiritual maturity that only emerges when you stop trying to impress others and start impressing heaven. At 50, you finally understand that authenticity outweighs approval, and this freedom becomes the soil where your most powerful ministry blooms. You're no longer competing, you're collaborating with divine purpose. And that shift transforms everything about how you approach your remaining years. The world celebrates the courage of young dreamers who don't know what they're up against. But there's a different kind of courage in the woman who knows exactly what she's facing and chooses faith anyway. Your story carries weight because it's been tested by time, refined by reality, and proven through perseverance. The young woman's testimony says God is good, but your testimony declares God is faithful, and that's the difference between hope and certainty. Consider Sarah's story beyond the Sunday school version. A woman who waited decades for God's promise, experienced the grief of apparent infertility, laughed bitterly at God's timing, yet became the mother of nations at 90. Her laughter transformed. From cynicism to celebration, the same transformation available to you. Your delays, disappointments, and even your doubts are part of a larger narrative that only becomes clear with the perspective that age provides. Here's your first practice. Write one sentence that captures your faith story. Not your testimony, your story. The messy, beautiful, broken, redeemed narrative that only you can tell. Maybe it's, I learned to trust God most when I understood Him least, or, my faith grew strongest when my marriage fell apart. You just took the first step toward realizing that your story is yours is exactly what someone desperately needs to hear. But most women miss the one thing that makes faith stick through generations, instead of dying with them. Controversial truth. The biggest threat to your spiritual legacy isn't your past mistakes. It's the lie that you can control the faith outcomes of people you love. Listen, I know you lie awake wondering if you did enough, said enough, prayed enough for your children, grandchildren, spouse. You replay every conversation where you could have spoken up about Jesus. You carry guilt over every Sunday they missed church, every prayer they didn't hear. Here's what shocked me. God doesn't need your perfect parenting to reach your family. Feel that weight on your shoulders when you think about their spiritual choices. Let's lift that off right now. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring, and my blessing on your descendants. Isaiah 44, Banding 3. Spiritual anxiety is a subtle form of pride, assumes God's plans depend entirely on your performance rather than His faithfulness. When you release control, you're not abandoning responsibility. You're stepping into a more mature faith that trusts God's love for your family exceeds even your own. This surrender doesn't make you less involved. It makes you more effective because your prayers flow from peace rather than panic. The hardest lesson of mature motherhood is learning that your children's relationship with God is between them and God, not between them and you. Your role shifts from spiritual manager to spiritual intercessor, from faith enforcer to faith example. This transition feels like loss, but it's actually promotion. You're moving from trying to control their choices to influencing their hearts through the power of consistent love and fervent prayer. Research from Baylor University's Institute for Studies of Religion shows that parental spiritual anxiety often correlates with children's spiritual distance. The tighter you grip, the further they pull away. This isn't failure, it's the natural process of spiritual individuation. Even Jesus had to release his disciples to find their own faith. Mary watched her son be misunderstood, rejected, and crucified, yet trusted God's plan beyond her understanding. Your spiritual motherhood might require this same kind of letting go. Your practice: write a release prayer for one person you've been trying to spiritually manage. Say, God, I place name in your capable hands. I trust you love them more than I do. This isn't giving up, this is giving God room to work without your anxiety getting in the way. Here's the shocking truth about controlling outcomes that will change everything. Plot twist. The season when you feel most invisible is when you become most influential. 50 hits different, doesn't it? Suddenly you're not the young mom everyone asks for help. You're not the career woman climbing ladders. You walk into rooms and wonder if anyone sees you at all. The culture whispers that your usefulness has an expiration date. That warm light hitting your face in the morning mirror. That's God illuminating something the world can't see: your accumulated wisdom. Here's what God sees when you feel forgotten. He sees a woman who's been refined by fire, softened by suffering, and strengthened by seasons. He sees someone who's learned to trust him when the answers weren't clear. Society mistakes visibility for value, but God measures impact differently. While the world chases after youth and noise, he treasures the quiet strength that comes from walking with him through decades of triumph and trial. Your influence isn't diminishing, it's deepening. The young women who seem to overshadow you today will someday need exactly the kind of seasoned wisdom you're developing right now. Invisibility becomes a superpower when you understand its purpose. Like a master artist who steps back from the canvas to see the full picture, your season of feeling unseen allows you to gain perspective that the spotlight never provides. You're not fading away, you're gaining clarity. This season of perceived invisibility is actually preparation for unprecedented influence, because those who feel forgotten by the world are often remembered most clearly by God. Yet let's acknowledge the real grief here. Whether you're mourning an empty nest, navigating widowhood, facing health challenges, or simply feeling overlooked in an youth-obsessed culture, the pain of invisibility is genuine. Anna the prophetess knew this feeling, widowed young, spending decades in the temple, waiting and watching while others dismissed her as just another elderly woman. But God positioned her perfectly to recognize the Messiah when he arrived. Your winter season isn't punishment. It's positioning. Your practice: stand in front of a mirror and speak Isaiah 43:4 to yourself. You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you. The world may overlook your wrinkles, but God treasures your wisdom. Every line tells a story of faithfulness. The secret role you're playing in God's kingdom will blow your mind. Everything you thought was failure. Here's the plot twist that changes everything. Those years when nothing made sense, the divorce, the prodigal children, the financial struggles, the health scares, the dreams that died, what if they weren't detours from God's plan? What if they were the plan? The wilderness wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel. Jesus spent 40 days before launching ministry. You've been in your own wilderness, learning things you couldn't learn any other way. Every wilderness season has two purposes: stripping away what you don't need and developing what you do. The comfort zones that had to be abandoned, the dependencies that had to be broken, the pride that had to be humbled, none of it was wasted. God was building something in you that could only be forged in the fire of difficulty. creating strength that can only come through struggle. The wilderness doesn't just prepare you for ministry, is ministry. Every tear you've cried in confusion has watered seeds of compassion for others in confusion. Every night you've wrestled with God has built spiritual muscle for wrestling on behalf of others. Every question that's driven you to your knees has prepared you to help others find their footing. Your wilderness wandering wasn't time lost. It was investment made in the woman you're becoming. Your practice: create a wilderness gifts list. Write down one thing each difficult season taught you about God, yourself, or faith that you couldn't have learned in comfort. Those weren't wasted years, they were investment years. Every struggle was preparing you for influence you're just beginning to understand. But here's the game-changing element: most women skip that turns preparation into power. Here's the game-changing element: the simplest practices have the deepest impact. Forget the elaborate devotional plans that lasted 3 days. Forget the guilt over not praying for an hour like the spiritual giants. At 50 plus, you need sustainability, not complexity. That's steam rising from your coffee cup. Let it remind you that simple, daily rhythms create the most lasting change. Here's your 5-minute morning that changes everything. Minute 1. Breathe and say good morning. God. Minutes 2 to 3. Read one verse, any verse. Minute 4. Pray one breath prayer. Spirit, fill me. Minute 5. Ask, how can I love well today? This isn't about perfection, it's about connection. 5 minutes of showing up consistently beats 1 hour of sporadic intensity. The beauty of mature faith is that it stops trying to impress God and starts simply enjoying Him. Your morning practice isn't about earning points or proving devotion, it's about maintaining connection with the one who loves you completely. These 5 minutes create a spiritual anchor that steadies you through whatever the day brings, building spiritual muscle through consistency rather than intensity. This simple morning rhythm becomes your spiritual thermostat, setting the temperature for your entire day. When you begin with God, everything else finds its proper place. Problems shrink to their actual size, blessings become more noticeable, and people become less irritating. It's not magic, it's relationship. You're not just starting your day. You're starting your day with the one who already knows how it will unfold and promises to walk through it with you. Neuroscience research from UCLA shows that consistent morning meditation practices literally rewire the brain, strengthening areas associated with emotional regulation and empathy while reducing anxiety pathways. Your 5-minute practice isn't just spiritual, it's neurologically transformative. For women dealing with menopausal brain fog, grief-related depression, or chronic illness fatigue, this isn't about adding another burden. Adapt it. Pray in bed if mobility is limited, use voice recordings if reading is difficult, or simply breathe God's name if words feel impossible. You just discovered that faithful is better than fanatical. Consistency compounds into transformation. But here's the game-changing element most skip. The surprising person who needs your exact story might shock you. We spend decades trying to hide our scars, our failures, our broken places. But here's what I've learned. Your scars are your credentials. The places you've been wounded and healed, that's where your ministry lives. Feel those soft pages whispering under your fingers. Every mark, every highlight represents a moment when God met you in your brokenness. Someone right now is walking through exactly what nearly broke you 5, 10, 20 years ago. They need to hear from someone who survived it, not someone who avoided it. Your scars tell a story of God's faithfulness that untested testimonies cannot. While those who've lived charmed lives can speak of God's goodness, you can speak of His saving power. Your broken places, now healed, become windows where others can see the light of hope. The very experiences you once wished you could erase are now the chapters others need to read. There's something profoundly beautiful about a woman who has been broken and beautifully mended. She doesn't pretend life is easy or faith is simple, but she radiates a peace that can only come from having wrestled with God and emerged blessed. Your scars aren't shameful marks of failure, they're sacred marks of survival. They prove that you are stronger than what tried to destroy you, and more importantly, that God is faithful to what He promised to restore. Your practice. Share one scar as testimony this week. Tell someone how God met you in a broken place and brought healing, wisdom, or strength. Your willingness to be vulnerable about your healing creates permission for others to hope. This changes everything about your next 20 years. This changes everything about your next 20 years, whether you have biological grandchildren or not. The grandmother calling isn't about bloodlines, it's about spiritual lines. Every woman over 50 is called to be a spiritual grandmother, passing down faith wisdom to the next generation. Maybe your children live far away. Maybe you never had children. Maybe your grandchildren barely know you. Here's the beautiful truth. God has spiritual daughters waiting for your mothering. That velvet jewelry box opening. Feel the weight of legacy being transferred from one generation to the next. Look around your church, your community. There's a young woman struggling with marriage, parenting, faith questions. She needs what you have, perspective that only comes with years, wisdom earned through valleys, and faith tested by fire. The grandmother calling transcends biology and embraces destiny. This isn't about replacing anyone's mother, it's about becoming the spiritual mentor every young woman needs. Your life experience becomes their roadmap, your hard-won wisdom becomes their inheritance, and your prayers become their covering. You're not too old to matter. You're finally old enough to minister at the deepest level. Every young woman needs a grandmother figure, someone who's walked the path she's walking, survived the storms she's facing, and learned the lessons she's learning. Your empty nest isn't evidence of uselessness. It's preparation for a different kind of mothering. The love you poured into your own children has created capacity for loving someone else's children. The wisdom gained from your mistakes becomes guidance that helps them avoid similar pitfalls. This is ministry multiplication at its finest. This calling transcends traditional boundaries. Maybe you're single and never had children. Your undivided attention becomes a gift to someone else's daughter. Perhaps you're divorced and rebuilding your resilience becomes their roadmap. If you're widowed and grieving, your journey through loss becomes their comfort in future trials. The Titus II mandate for older women to teach younger women isn't about perfect lives. It's about processed lives. Your scars, not your success, qualify you for this sacred calling. Your practice. Adopt one spiritual daughter. Look for someone 15 to 20 years younger who could benefit from your friendship, wisdom, and faith example. You just stepped into one of the most powerful roles God assigns. The spiritual grandmother who bridges generations with love and wisdom. The prayer mistake that keeps God distant will surprise you. The prayer mistake that keeps God distant, trying too hard to feel something. Prayer changes as you age. The passionate, emotional prayers of your younger years might feel forced now. Your prayers feel like echoes in an empty room. You wonder if God hears, if He cares, if you're doing it wrong. What if the silence isn't God's absence, it's His presence at a deeper level? Watch that candle flame in perfect stillness. That's what your prayer life is becoming: less dramatic, more sustained. Mature prayer moves beyond performance to presence. The desperate crying out of earlier years gives way to quiet confidence. The urgent pleading transforms into peaceful surrender. You're not losing your prayer life, you're deepening it. Like a marriage that moves from passionate infatuation to steady love. Your relationship with God is maturing into something more profound than emotion. It's becoming communion. This shift from dramatic prayer to quiet intimacy often feels like spiritual decline, but it's actually spiritual promotion. You're graduating from the kindergarten of prayer where everything had to be loud and demonstrative to the graduate school of prayer where a glance communicates more than a speech. Your prayers are becoming less about getting God's attention and more about enjoying His presence, less about changing God's mind and more about aligning your heart. Your practice. Try silent listening prayer. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Don't ask for anything. Don't confess anything. Just be present with God and let Him be present with you. Mature prayer is less about feeling and more about faithfulness, less about emotion and more about devotion. You're discovering that the deepest conversations with God happen in comfortable silence, like old friends who don't need words. The power object that multiplies blessing will amaze you. The power object that multiplies blessing. Your home transformed into sacred space. Your house feels different now, quieter, emptier. Rooms that once burst with family life now echo with memories. But what if this isn't emptiness, it's opportunity? Feel that soft blanket texture as you create a prayer corner. This is your home becoming a sanctuary, not just a shelter. Your home can become a powerhouse of spiritual influence. A place where prayers are offered, blessings are spoken, and peace is cultivated so tangibly that people feel it when they walk in. Every room becomes a chapel when consecrated with prayer. Every meal becomes communion when blessed with gratitude. Every conversation becomes ministry when bathed in love. Your home isn't just where you live, it's where heaven touches earth through your faithful presence. The peace you cultivate in private becomes the atmosphere others experience when they enter your space. Your home is your first and most important ministry field. Before you can impact the world, you must sanctify your space. When you intentionally create an environment where God's presence is welcomed and His peace is cultivated, your home becomes a refuge for weary souls, a sanctuary for searching hearts, and a glimpse of heaven for those who've forgotten what peace feels like. The ministry that happens in your living room might be more powerful than what happens from any pulpit. Your practice. Designate one corner, one chair, one space as your family prayer spot. Make it comfortable, beautiful, and sacred. Pray there daily for your family, friends, and community. You're turning your home into a spiritual powerhouse where heaven touches earth through your faithful prayers. But there's one story you've never told that could change everything. But there's one story you've never told, and it's the most important one. We document everything these days: what we ate, where we went, how we felt. But the stories that matter most, the God stories, the faith moments, the answered prayers, those we keep to ourselves. Hear that crackling audio warmth? That's the sound of legacy being preserved for generations who haven't been born yet. Your great-granddaughter will want to know, how did great-grandma's faith survive that tragedy? What sustained her through those difficult years? What did she learn about God that I need to know? Your silence about God's faithfulness robs future generations of their inheritance. While you worry about sounding too spiritual or too dramatic, your descendants hunger for proof that faith works in real life. Your untold stories of divine intervention, unexpected provision, and supernatural peace are treasures waiting to be discovered. Don't take God's goodness to the grave. Give it away while you're still here to tell it. Stories shape souls more than sermons ever could. When your great-granddaughter faces her darkest hour, she won't need another theological explanation. She'll need the story of how great-grandmother's faith carried her through a similar darkness. Your voice, telling the tale of God's faithfulness, will echo across decades to provide hope for hearts not yet broken, strength for battles not yet fought, and faith for futures not yet imagined. Record now what will sustain them later. Your practice. Voice record one faith testimony this week. Tell the story of one time God showed up, provided, protected, or guided you through something difficult. You're creating an inheritance more valuable than money. The gift of knowing that God is faithful through every generation. The curse you can break with one decision will shock you. The curse you can break with one decision. Generational spiritual poverty. Look back at your family line. See the patterns. The addiction, the abandonment, the abuse, the spiritual emptiness that passed from parent to child like a toxic inheritance. Maybe you inherited it too. But here's the power you carry at 50 plus. You can be the generation where it stops. The spiritual poverty ends with you. Feel that paper curling in the flames. That's generational bondage being broken by the power of forgiveness and faith. Every family line has a potential turning point, a generation that chooses blessing over bondage, faith over fear, love over legacy wounds. You are positioned to be that turning point. The spiritual authority that comes with age, combined with the wisdom gained through experience, gives you the power to break chains that have bound your family for generations. You're not just living your life, you're rewriting your family's spiritual DNA. Breaking generational patterns requires both supernatural power and natural persistence. The cycle stops with you not just because you decide it will, but because you possess something your ancestors lacked: the combination of spiritual maturity, life experience, and divine authority that comes with age. You've seen enough, survived enough, and learned enough to recognize toxic patterns and refuse to pass them on. Your choice to break the cycle isn't just personal, it's prophetic, declaring a new destiny for everyone who comes after you. Consider the multi-generational impact. Studies show that family dysfunction patterns typically persist for 3 to 4 generations unless consciously interrupted. Perhaps your grandmother struggled with anxiety passed down from poverty-era survival fears. Maybe your mother inherited religious shame that distorted her view of God's love. You carry the authority to declare, "The pattern of spiritual poverty that entered my family line through trauma, addiction, or abandonment stops here." This isn't positive thinking, it's spiritual warfare fought and won through forgiveness, prayer, and conscious choice. Your practice: write a forgiveness letter to the ancestors who passed down spiritual poverty, addiction, or dysfunction. Burn it as an act of breaking the cycle. Declare, "It stops with me." You just became the generational game changer. The one who says, "Not on my watch," to spiritual poverty in your family line. The prayer that outlives you by decades is coming next. The prayer that outlives you by decades. The blessing you speak over future generations. Your voice carries authority you don't realize. When you speak blessing over your family, children, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren, not yet born, something happens in the spiritual realm that echoes through time. Feel that warm breath on the microphone. That's the breath of life speaking destiny over people you may never meet, but will forever influence. Jacob blessed his sons and grandsons on his deathbed, and those blessings shaped nations. Your blessing voice has that same power. Words create worlds, and your words create the spiritual atmosphere your descendants will breathe. The blessings you speak today become the spiritual inheritance they'll draw upon tomorrow. Your voice, seasoned by years of walking with God, carries weight that younger voices cannot. When you speak life, protection, purpose, and divine favor over future generations, you're not just hoping, you're declaring what will be. There's something mystical about the blessing voice of a spiritual elder. Your words don't just express wishes, they release spiritual realities. When you speak blessing over your family, you're not just being nice, you're exercising the authority that comes with spiritual longevity. The prayers you pray today create the spiritual climate your descendants will live in tomorrow. Your blessing voice echoes through time, shaping destinies and determining outcomes for people you may never meet but will forever influence through the power of your spoken faith. Your practice: record specific blessing prayers for each family member. Speak life, purpose, protection, and spiritual prosperity over them. Save these recordings as legacy gifts. You're learning that your words don't just communicate, they create reality in the lives of people you love. The dream God's been protecting until now will amaze you. The dream God's been protecting until now, your 50-plus calling that couldn't happen any sooner. Society tries to convince you that 50 is the beginning of the end, that dreams have expiration dates, that your best years are behind you. What if it's all backwards? What if God was protecting your biggest dream until you had the wisdom to steward it well? Feel that pen ink flowing on cream paper. That's liquid possibility becoming solid purpose. Moses was 80 when he led the Exodus. Sarah was 90 when she birthed promise. Your age isn't a limitation. It's preparation time finally coming to fruition. Some dreams require decades of preparation that you couldn't shortcut even if you tried. The patience you've developed, the character you've built, the trust you've cultivated, these weren't consolation prizes for unfulfilled dreams. They were prerequisites for the dream God always intended. Your delays weren't denials. They were developments. Now you're ready for what would have destroyed you at 30 and overwhelmed you at 40. The dreams that matter most to God are often the ones that require the most maturity to handle. The calling that's emerging in your 50s needed 50 years of preparation. Every detour was necessary. Every delay was purposeful. Every disappointment was preparation for this appointed time. You're not starting late, you're starting right on time. The dream that seemed dead was just dormant, waiting for you to become the woman capable of stewarding it well. Your practice. Open a dream journal. Write down every God dream you've buried, dismissed as too late, or talked yourself out of because of your age. You're discovering that God's timing isn't early or late, it's perfect. Your dreams are right on schedule. How your Tuesday affects eternity will blow your mind. How your Tuesday affects eternity. The ministry of ordinary moments. You think ministry happens on Sundays, in churches, with official titles, but the most powerful ministry happens Tuesday morning in your kitchen, Friday afternoon in the grocery store, Saturday evening in your garden. Feel that flower dust dancing in the sunbeam. Every ordinary moment becomes sacred when you invite God into it. The kingdom of God isn't built in grand gestures, but in gracious moments. Your smile to the tired cashier, your patience in traffic, your kindness to the difficult neighbor, these seemingly small acts create ripples that reach eternity. Ministry isn't what you do, it's how you live. When every moment is surrendered to God, every interaction becomes an opportunity to reveal His character. Tuesday matters because it's in the ordinary moments that extraordinary ministry happens. The grand platforms and formal ministries get the attention, but the real kingdom work happens in grocery store aisles and coffee shop conversations. Your gentle response to the cranky customer, your patient listening to the lonely neighbor, your encouraging word to the overwhelmed young mother. These small acts of love are actually massive acts of ministry that can change someone's entire day, week, or even their perspective on faith itself. Your practice. Choose one daily routine this week and turn it into a ministry moment. Bless your household tasks. Pray while you cook. Turn grocery shopping into worship. Make the ordinary extraordinary. The bread you knead with prayer feeds more than bodies, it nourishes souls. The home you keep with worship becomes a sanctuary for everyone who enters. You're learning that there's no such thing as secular living when every moment is surrendered to God. The doubt that leads to unshakable faith is coming. The doubt that leads to unshakable faith, embracing questions as spiritual growth. At 50 plus, your faith gets more complex, not less. The simple answers that satisfied you at 25 feel insufficient now. You have questions about suffering, prayers that seem unanswered, promises that feel delayed. Here's what the church doesn't tell you. Doubt isn't the enemy of faith, shallow certainty is. Feel that fog lifting from the landscape. That's what happens when you let your questions lead you deeper, instead of driving you away. The psalmists doubted. Job questioned. Even John the Baptist wondered if Jesus was really the one. Your questions don't disqualify you, they mature you. Doubt becomes dangerous only when it leads to distance from God, rather than dialogue with Him. The faith that can't be questioned can't be trusted. Your doubts aren't evidence of spiritual failure. They're invitations to spiritual growth. A faith that has wrestled with hard questions and emerged still believing is a faith that can weather any storm life brings. The doubts that torment you at 50 aren't the same doubts that troubled you at 25. These are mature doubts. Questions born not from inexperience but from deep experience with both God's goodness and life's complexity. These doubts don't threaten your faith, they deepen it. When you bring your questions to God instead of hiding them from Him, you discover that He's big enough to handle your honesty and strong enough to withstand your wrestling. This isn't crisis, it's growth. Your practice. Write one honest prayer about a doubt you've been ashamed to voice. Bring your questions to God instead of hiding them from Him. You're discovering that faith strong enough to doubt is faith strong enough to endure anything life brings. The authority you don't know you carry will change everything. The authority you don't know you carry. Supernatural influence that comes with spiritual maturity. Young believers have enthusiasm. Mature believers have authority. At 50 plus, you're not just saved, you're seasoned. You've been tested, refined, and proven faithful. That gives you spiritual weight. Feel that wind stirring through the trees. That's the Spirit moving through your prayers with power you're just beginning to understand. Your prayers carry more weight now. Your worship has deeper roots. When you speak blessing, it lands with authority earned through decades of faithfulness. Authority isn't assumed, it's accumulated. Every trial you've weathered, every temptation you've resisted, every season you've remained faithful has added to your spiritual credibility. Your words now carry the weight of tested faith. Your prayers flow from proven trust, and your influence extends beyond your years because it's backed by your faithfulness. Heaven takes notice when seasoned saints speak. This supernatural influence isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. You don't carry authority because you've never failed. You carry it because you've failed and gotten back up, fallen and found grace, stumbled and kept walking. Your influence is powerful because it's been purchased through pain, refined through trials, and proven through time. When you pray, you're not just a woman hoping, you're a warrior who's already won battles, and that makes all the difference in the spiritual realm. Your practice, this week, prophetically pray over your community. Stand in a place where you can see your town and speak blessing, protection, and revival over it. You're stepping into the authority that comes with spiritual longevity, the influence that can only be earned, never given. The adventure that's been waiting for you is about to be revealed. The adventure that's been waiting for you, the courage to start over when everyone expects you to settle. The world tells you that 50 is settling time. Time to accept limitations, lower expectations, play it safe. But what if God saved your greatest adventure for when you finally have the wisdom to navigate it? Feel that fresh air rushing through the open door. That's possibility calling your name, inviting you to step into something new. Starting over at 50 plus isn't desperate, it's courageous. It takes more faith to begin again when you know how hard the journey can be. There's a profound difference between starting over in desperation and starting over in wisdom. You're not running from failure, you're running toward fulfillment. The courage to begin again at this stage of life isn't reckless, it's refined. You know the cost, understand the challenges, and choose to pay the price anyway because you also know the value of time and the power of purposeful living. Starting over at 50 carries a gravitas that starting over at 25 never could. You're not naive about the difficulties ahead, which makes your decision to begin again all the more courageous. This isn't the reckless abandon of youth, it's the calculated courage of maturity. You've learned that security isn't found in staying comfortable, but in staying faithful to God's calling on your life, regardless of your age. Your willingness to risk again proves that your faith is alive and your story is still being written. Your practice. Take one faith risk this week. Apply for something you want. Start something you've been dreaming about. Say yes to an opportunity that scares and excites you. You're proving that age is not a limitation on God's plans, it's just more equipment for the adventure. The approach that melts the hardest hearts is coming. The approach that melts the hardest hearts. Building bridges to family members who've rejected faith. Your adult children stopped going to church. Your spouse rolls their eyes at your faith. Family members mock your beliefs. Every conversation about God ends in tension. You've tried arguing, pleading, manipulating. Nothing works. Feel those fingers reaching across the space. Sometimes the bridge is built by your love, not your words. The most powerful apologetic isn't an argument, it's a transformed life lived with consistent love. When your faith makes you kinder rather than critical, more gracious rather than judgmental, they stop seeing your beliefs as a threat and start seeing them as a treasure. Your winsome witness speaks louder than your worried words. Love builds bridges that logic cannot construct. Family members who've rejected faith are often reacting to religion they've experienced, not the relationship you've discovered. They've seen faith that judges more than it loves, condemns more than it comforts, and demands more than it delivers. Your opportunity is to show them faith that looks different, faith that makes you safer to be around, not more dangerous. Faith that makes you more interested in their hearts than their habits. When they see faith that heals rather than hurts, they become curious about the God who could create such transformation. Your practice, instead of talking about faith, live it so attractively that they become curious. Love without agenda. Serve without preaching. Pray without announcing it. You're learning that hearts change through love experienced, not arguments won. How your smallest gift creates the biggest impact will amaze you. How your smallest gift creates the biggest impact. Your widow's mite multiplied through faithful giving. You look at your fixed income, your smaller savings account, your reduced earning potential and think, what can I possibly give that matters? Jesus noticed the widow who gave 2 small coins while rich people gave large amounts. Here's the secret. God multiplies small gifts from faithful hearts more than large gifts from proud hands. Hear that paper sliding quietly under the door. That's the sound of sacrificial love creating miracles nobody sees but God. Your $20 given sacrificially carries more spiritual power than someone else's $2,000 given carelessly. Your small act of service, done in love, creates ripples that reach eternity. God's mathematics work differently than ours. He doesn't measure your giving by the size of your gift, but by the size of your sacrifice. The widow's 2 coins were worth more than all the temple's treasures because they represented everything she had. Your small gifts, given from a generous heart and limited resources, move heaven more than larger gifts given from abundance without thought. The power in your giving isn't in the amount, it's in the attitude. When you give sacrificially from a fixed income, you're participating in the same kind of giving that caught Jesus' attention in the temple. Your $20 gas card given to a struggling single mom carries more spiritual weight than a $2,000 check written carelessly by someone who won't miss it. God multiplies faith-filled gifts, not just large gifts. Your widow's mite, given in love, creates miracles that mansions cannot purchase. Your practice, give anonymously this week. Leave money for someone's coffee. Pay someone's grocery bill. Give without recognition or tax deduction. Just love in action. You're discovering that the size of your gift matters less than the size of your faith when you give it. The mistake that becomes your greatest testimony is the most powerful truth yet. The mistake that becomes your greatest testimony, faith that survives your failures and grows stronger. This is the big one. The mistake you can't forgive yourself for. The choice that derailed your family. The sin that you think disqualifies you from ministry, from influence, from God's love. Here's the scandalous grace truth. God doesn't just forgive your worst mistake, He transforms it into your most powerful testimony. Feel that crumpled paper smoothing out. That's what God does with our failures. He doesn't erase them, He redeems them. Peter denied Jesus 3 times and became the rock of the early church. David committed adultery and murder and remained a man after God's own heart. Paul murdered Christians and became the greatest evangelist in history. Your greatest failure doesn't disqualify you from God's purposes, qualifies you for His grace in ways that perfection never could. The very thing that makes you feel unusable is what makes you uniquely useful. Your mess becomes your message, your test becomes your testimony, and your wounds become your ministry credentials. God specializes in resurrection stories, and yours is next. The mistake that haunts you is the very experience that will heal someone else. God doesn't waste our failures, He transforms them into our qualifications for ministry. The woman who's never struggled with addiction can encourage someone fighting addiction. But the woman who's been delivered from addiction can speak with authority about God's power to set captives free. Your greatest shame becomes your greatest platform for displaying His grace. Don't hide what God wants to redeem. Your practice. Write a grace letter to yourself. Speak the words you need to hear about God's forgiveness, redemption, and continued love despite your failures. You're learning that your greatest failures can become your most powerful platforms for displaying God's incredible grace. The perspective shift that changes everything is almost here. The perspective shift that changes everything. Making daily decisions through heaven's lens. At 50 plus, heaven isn't a distant concept, you're approaching reality. This shift changes how you spend your time, money, energy, and love. Every choice becomes a choice between temporal and eternal. Feel those stars twinkling in the vast darkness. That's eternity calling you to live with heaven in view. Living with eternity in mind doesn't make you heavenly minded and no earthly good. It makes you earthly effective because you understand what actually matters. The trivial loses its power to upset you. The important becomes clear, and the urgent gives way to the eternal. Your decisions gain weight because they're made with the end in mind, and your days gain meaning because they're lived with forever in view. When heaven becomes more real than earth, your priorities automatically align with God's heart. You stop sweating the small stuff because you understand how small it really is in light of eternity. You invest more in relationships and less in things, more in character and less in comfort, more in legacy and less in luxury. This perspective doesn't make you impractical, it makes you wise. Seeing life through the lens of what lasts forever rather than what fades with time. Your practice. Make one daily decision this week through the heaven lens. Single quotes. Ask yourself, how will this choice matter in eternity, before you act? When you live like heaven is real, temporary problems lose their power, earthly pleasures lose their appeal, kingdom priorities become clear. You're developing the eternal perspective that makes every day matter and every choice count. Your faith will echo through generations in ways you never imagined. Your faith will echo through generations in ways you never imagined through this final practice. This is your masterpiece, a letter to great-grandchildren not yet born, descendants you'll never meet, carrying your faith forward to generations you can only imagine. What would you want your great-great-granddaughter to know about faith, about God's faithfulness, about surviving life's hardest seasons? Feel that hot wax hardening with your family crest. That's your faith being sealed into your family's spiritual DNA forever. This letter will outlive every earthly investment you've ever made. Long after your house has been sold and your savings account spent, these words will speak life into hearts you'll never hold but will forever influence. You're not just writing to future family, you're writing future family history. This legacy letter becomes the spiritual constitution that guides generations yet unborn. Imagine your great-granddaughter facing a crisis in a world you can't imagine, opening this letter and finding exactly the words she needs to hear. Picture your descendant, discouraged and ready to give up on faith, discovering through your words that someone in their family line walked this path before and emerged victorious. This letter isn't just communication, it's prophecy. Speaking life into futures not yet lived, providing hope for hearts not yet broken, and declaring God's faithfulness to generations not yet born. Write what they'll need to read. Your practice. Write a legacy letter to be opened by future generations. Share your deepest faith insights, your stories of God's faithfulness, and your prayers for their spiritual journey. This letter will outlive you. It will speak when you can't. It will bless generations you'll only meet in heaven. You've just ensured that your faith story continues long after your voice goes silent. Your legacy is secure. Look what you've just accomplished. 22 transformations that turn your faith after 50 from survival mode into legacy mode. You've claimed your faith story matters more at 50. Released control over family outcomes. Recognized your value when you feel invisible. Reframed your wilderness as preparation. Created sustainable spiritual rhythms. You've learned your scars qualify you for ministry. Embraced your grandmother calling. Discovered prayer in silence. Made your home sacred space. Preserved stories for generations. You've broken generational curses. Recorded blessing prayers. Resurrected buried dreams. Found ministry in ordinary moments. Let doubt deepen your faith. You've recognized your spiritual authority. Found courage to start over. Built bridges with love. Multiplied small gifts. Let mistakes become testimony. And finally, you're living with heaven in view and writing letters that will echo through eternity. Your wisdom years aren't your consolation prize, they're your victory lap with purpose. Listen to me. Society may whisper that your best years are behind you, but God is shouting that your most influential years are just beginning. Every wrinkle tells a story of faithfulness. Every gray hair represents wisdom earned through fire. Every quiet moment in your empty house is God preparing space for something magnificent. If you've made it this far, you're in the top 3% of people who actually finish transformation content. You're not just listening, you're becoming. That dedication tells me everything about the woman God is shaping you into. Imagine looking back 6 months from now, knowing you started this legacy journey today. Picture yourself at 65, 70, 75, not just surviving but thriving, not just existing but influencing generations. Your faith story after 50 isn't ending, it's reaching its crescendo. The best chapters are still being written. The most powerful prayers are yet to be prayed. The greatest influence is yet to be wielded. Your legacy starts now.